Eric never thought much of Max's quirks. Dogs dig, it's what they do. But lately, Max had developed an obsession. Every evening, without fail, the golden retriever would trot out to the backyard and start clawing at the same patch of dirt near the old oak tree. No matter how many times Eric scolded him, locked him inside, or even filled the hole back up, Max would go right back the next night. And each night, the hole grew deeper. "Enough, Max," Eric groaned one evening, pulling the dog away by his collar. Max whined, straining against his grip, his paws still scraping at the loose dirt. Eric peered down at the hole, his brows knitting together. A glint of something metallic caught the fading sunlight. He frowned, squatting down for a closer look. "What's that?" he muttered to himself, brushing away the dirt with his fingers. His heart skipped. Beneath the soil lay the edge of a rusted metal box, its surface corroded and pitted with age. A shiver crawled up Eric's spine. He glanced over his shoulder at the quiet suburban street, feeling an inexplicable sense of unease creeping in. Taking a deep breath, he grabbed a shovel from the shed and started digging. With each scrape of the spade, the box emerged further from the earth. It was heavier than it looked, covered in grime, the padlock on it ancient but still intact. Eric stood there for a long moment, staring at it, his pulse thrumming in his ears. Something about the box felt wrong. That night, the box sat in the garage, staring at him. Eric sat at the kitchen table, nursing a beer, but his eyes kept drifting toward the garage door. His fingers drummed anxiously against the bottle, childhood fears bubbling to the surface. He remembered his grandfather's words, whispered late at night when Eric was a kid. "Some things are better left buried, boy. Once you dig them up, they never go back down the same." He shook the thought away. It was just an old box. What harm could it do? But as the hours dragged on, he felt it gnawing at him. Why had it been buried there? Who put it there? And, more unsettling, why did Max seem so determined to find it? Eric decided to wait until morning to open it, but sleep didn't come easily. He tossed and turned, the imagined sound of digging creeping into his dreams. The next morning, Eric snapped the rusted padlock open with a hammer, his hands clammy as he lifted the lid. Inside, bundled carefully in plastic, were stacks of photographs. Frowning, he pulled them out one by one, his breath catching in his throat as he flipped through them. They were old, the edges yellowed with time, but what made his skin crawl wasn't their age. It was their subject. Every photograph was of his family. His wife standing on the porch, his son playing in the backyard, him sitting in his favorite armchair. But these photos were dated decades earlier, long before they had ever moved into the house. Eric's hands trembled, a cold sweat breaking over his forehead. This had to be some kind of mistake, some elaborate prank. Maybe the previous owners had photos that just coincidentally looked like them. But deep down, he knew that wasn't the case. In the final photograph, taken in the same spot where Max had been digging, a figure stood in the background. A man. His face was blurred, but his silhouette felt familiar, uncomfortably so. Eric shoved the photos back into the box, his heart pounding. That night, he locked the garage door, but the digging continued. Lying in bed, Eric listened to the unmistakable scrape of dirt being moved. He bolted upright, adrenaline coursing through him. Max was curled up at the foot of the bed, sound asleep. Eric's stomach dropped. If Max was here, who was digging outside? Shaking, he grabbed a flashlight and crept toward the back door. Peering out through the glass, he saw a figure crouched near the hole, methodically scooping away dirt with their hands. It wasn't Max. It wasn't even human. The figure was gaunt, its limbs too long, its skin pale and stretched tight over bones. Its head twitched in unnatural movements as it clawed deeper into the earth. Eric's breath hitched in his throat. He stumbled back, heart hammering in his chest. The thing in the yard froze, its head snapping toward him with an eerie, jerky movement. Eric didn't stay to watch. He locked every door, every window, his hands trembling. And then the knocking started, soft, rhythmic, right against the glass. He didn't dare look. By morning, the backyard was pristine. No sign of a hole, no disturbed dirt, and the box in the garage, gone. Eric stood at the window, staring at the untouched lawn, his hands shaking. Max barked excitedly at the empty space, tail wagging as if something were still there. His phone buzzed, a new text from an unknown number. You shouldn't have dug it up." Eric's blood ran cold. He called the police, but they found nothing. No sign of a break-in, no signs of disturbance in the yard. They treated him like he was crazy, offering him a polite but skeptical nod before leaving. That night, he sat in his living room, every light on, gripping a baseball bat. And then he heard it. The digging had started again, closer this time. Days passed and Eric couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. He barely slept, barely ate, his paranoia gnawing at him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the shadowy figure crouched in his yard, digging deeper. Then, one evening, as he poured himself a drink with trembling hands, something slid under the front door. A single faded photograph. It was of him, taken from inside the house. Eric turned slowly, his throat dry, his hands icy with fear. The back door was wide open. The next morning, the neighbors noticed something strange. Eric's house was quiet, no sign of movement, no Max barking at the fence. Inside, everything was in place. His keys, wallet, half-eaten breakfast on the counter. But Eric was gone. The only thing left behind was a freshly dug hole in the backyard, and beside it, Max whining and digging deeper.